A warm welcome to Podcasts for Business. Podcasts for Business is all about helping businesses to share, well, your knowledge, your passion and your expertise. A Podcast for Business is brought to you in partnership with Network B2B. With networking groups across the UK, Network B2B is all about helping business connect, share information and grow. For more information on Network B2B, just check out networkb2b.co.uk.
Like to share news about your business, event, seminar or workshop? Simply email steve@stevetwynham.com.
You know, it's always great to bring, well, information to the business community about what's out there and also the great services that business provide in our region. And today I'm talking to Michael from MJ Law. Michael, how are you?
Very good, thank you, Steve.
Good. Now, in a series of short interviews or short podcasts, we're going to be talking about various things. But before we do that, tell me a bit about MJ Law.
Thanks. Well, I set up the firm just over 3.5 years ago. It's coming close to 4 actually now. And basically I wanted to find a little gap in the market where I felt that I could create a law firm that could help people in a big way. Now, I know all law firms will come up with a strategy of, well, we're there to try and help people, understandably, but I felt that there was something a little bit more that we could give. You know, from our perspective, we're a local-based law firm in Wakefield, and what we want to do is help the local people and businesses. And you know, there's numerous ways in which we can do that, really. Okay,
so what kind of services do you provide then? You know, in terms of, you know, free consultations, do you do things like that? And do people have to come to the office?
Yeah, so one of the big things that we do is free initial consultations, and you know, that's a great way of people being able to get some initial advice, and then obviously if they wanted to instruct us from there, fantastic. If not, you know, at least we've been able to give some guidance. We also pride ourselves on getting out to see people if they'd like us to go visit them, whether that be individuals in their homes or if it's people who want us to bob into their offices, to their businesses. From our perspective, we don't just want to be seen as one of those lawyers who's just at the end of the phone line, or you send an email to and you just get an email back. We want to actually be able to sit down with people for them to actually get to know us, to understand us, and it also helps us to understand our client and their needs a little bit more.
Okay, Michael, in the bigger practices, sometimes how can I put this delicately? You may not be working with a qualified solicitor. You may be working with a junior. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'll be honest. I've worked in larger law practices myself before, and obviously when people come to a firm, their cases don't always get allocated to a qualified solicitor. Sometimes it goes to a trainee or a paralegal, for example. When you come to us at MJL Law, you can be assured that it's a qualified solicitor who will deal with your case, no matter what type of case it is, whether it's a low value, high value, whether it's complex, non-complex. You can always be assured that a qualified solicitor will deal with it. And from our perspective, we feel that's important because it gives our clients that extra little bit of confidence. Okay, and I think you mentioned, did you work around fixed fees, and what about this no win, no fee as well? Do you do that? Yeah, we certainly do. It depends upon which service we're there to provide. So, for example, for commercial clients or for companies, we do debt recovery and commercial drafting, so that's contracts, terms and conditions, etc. We do them on a fixed fee basis. It gives the clients the certainty of they know exactly how much they're going to pay. They're not going to get any scary bills afterwards, and you know they can budget for that, and it works really well. And also for individuals, we do personal injury claims, and they are done on a no-win, no-fee basis, so they're really client-friendly. Sometimes they get a little bit of a bad press, understandably, but they're so client-friendly because you're not asking the client to pay anything up front. Everything's dealt with at the back end, and they know everything that's involved. And again, if they're unfortunate enough to lose their case, they don't have to pay anything, so it works really well for them. Okay, and the key services you provide are? Yes, so the main ones that we cover are debt recovery, so we do that commercially, so that's for companies. The drafting services, so as I mentioned, it's the terms and conditions, contracts for goods and services, and personal injury claims. That's everything from road traffic cases to accidents at work, etc. Okay, so we're going to cover those off in a series of podcasts with you. So today we're talking about terms and conditions and how important they and you know, I'm smiling because I bet there's many companies that don't have them. Or I know some companies that have just gone on the internet and downloaded some and
they're American. And how does that work? Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, it is, unfortunately. I wish I could sit here and say, you've got that totally wrong, Steve, but but sadly that is the case. And this is something that we do a lot with local companies, and to be fair, some further afield. And what we're trying to do is educate people as much as anything, because we often get companies who come to us further down the line, whether it's due to they've got some unpaid invoices, or they've got themselves into a scenario where they're in a dispute. And one of the first questions that I ask them is, well, show me your contract or your terms and conditions, because that's the starting point, ultimately. And the response quite often is, well, I haven't got anything. I've got a template offline which I just added a few bits on. Or the one which often kind of sends a bit of a shiver down my spine is, well, I borrowed some off my mate. And unless your mate's working in exactly the same industry, doing exactly the same thing as you, the chances are they're not going to be fit for purpose. So what we try and do is obviously educate people and say, right, you need to get the correct document in place. The benefits are endless, and what we do is we provide bespoke documents. So we will sit down with our clients. We'll have a detailed meeting. I always can call it a fact-find meeting, so I can really drill down and find out what they offer, and then I can draft the appropriate document, which will be totally fit for purpose for their requirements, for whether they provide goods, services, both, and they can be assured that they're always on a good footing going forward. And they're essential, in all honesty.
Okay. And there's a little bit about the disputes there, so you can avoid the dispute by you can pick up the terms and conditions. Is the obligations, though, on both parties in those T's and C's? Is it not all one way, is it? So if you're providing a service for something, I'm thinking, I tell you what's coming to my head as a coaching client. Okay, so as a coach, you've got certain criteria that you're delivering, but there are certain things you'd expect from a client, I would think, that you turn up on time, that you cancel if you cancel within so many whatever. So there's a bit on both sides.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and that's kind of a major part of the documents that we're drafting. It's something that doesn't often get covered when people use a template, for example, and that's purely probably down to the fact that they don't have the legal knowledge to draft the document correctly. And that's no disrespect to people out there who are doing it, but if you're a joiner, for example, you're good at doing joinery work. If you're an electrician, for example, you're fantastic with electrics. If you're a lawyer who specialises in drafting, this is what we do. So the customer or client obligations is something that's really, really important. And what I say to the clients is, what you're almost doing is flipping things back onto your client and saying, well, yes, I'm happy to work with you, but if you want to enlist my specialist services, I expect you to do X, Y, and Z. And you touched on some really good examples, and so we work quite a lot with the trades, and one which often crops up is access to property, for example. And I often get tradesmen saying, I have to park X amount of metres down the road, I've got to lug all my items and all my stuff up to the property. So, I mean, that's just a sort of a small example, but the obligation side of things is really, really important for companies. And what it does, it just allows them to provide their services in a better way for their clients, and it allows them to complete their jobs in a more efficient manner.
Okay, so it's very important that you've got them. What about within those things about data? Because we've got all this big thing, haven't we? Data protection or GD, whatever. So does that need to be in the T's and C's about how you manage that data?
Absolutely, yeah. So any company who handles any form of client data, which, let's be honest, it's going to apply to all companies, because ultimately, as soon as you get a new client in, you're going to be obtaining detailed information from them, whether it's anything from an email addresses, etc. So it's important to ensure that your T's and C's or your contracts reflect how you will handle that data. So what we would always put in there is not only a confidentiality clause, which obviously would cover you in terms of saying what you're going to do with that data, but you also need to ensure that you have a GDPR clause. Now, obviously, last year, GDPR was huge. Obviously, it took over from the old data protection regulations. So it's extremely important that that's stated in there, because it ensures that your document's up to date, and it ensures that you're compliant in respect of your client data. And sometimes, I'll often get asked to review current terms and conditions, which is a service that we offer. And the first thing that I tend to look for within that, I'll just flick through to see, right, do you have a GDPR clause? And that will tell me straight away if it's at least been done within the last 18 months. And it's something that often gets overlooked, unfortunately.
Okay, and that's one other question on this then, Michael, because that's an interesting point. You see, you need to review them then.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, but I'm very quick. I was just thinking there. Yeah. Just because you've got one that's been there for 4 years ago, things change, so you do need to review them.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's important, and that's purely from a perspective that the law does change. But not only that, you've also got to revisit them to ensure that they're still covering what you provide, because companies change as well, don't they?
Yeah.
No matter what industry you were in, your company will change at some point, whether it's just a small little tweak here and there, or sometimes it's just companies, they may drop one service and add another one on, for example. So it's important to ensure that these are all detailed within your contractual document, because ultimately, if they're not in there and then an issue arises, you are then opening yourself up to some problems, unfortunately. So really important to keep them up to date.
Well, I tell you what, there's plenty of food for thought there, isn't there? There's lots of things that, you're setting a business up. You don't think about all this. You think about your marketing, you think about your stationery, you think about your business cards, don't you? But you don't think about this generally. I would suggest. I don't. Yeah.
No, that's a really valid point, actually. And what we're trying to do at present is we're trying to get into a position where we can help start-up companies. We want to help them from day one to minimise issues going forward. And we appreciate, yes, it's something additional which a new company would have to put in place. As you rightly mentioned, the marketing side of things is really important. Making sure your services or your goods are up to scratch, but also to get you on a good legal footing from day one. If we can enable and help companies to do that, I think it'd be really beneficial.
Cool. So, Michael, the great question then, how can people get in contact with you?
Numerous ways, really. If you want to be very traditional, which a lot of people still do, you can contact us by telephone, which is 01924 669 406. We've got a nice little website if anybody wants to take a look. That's www.mjllaw.co.uk. All our email and contact details are on there. We also have a really productive and good Facebook page. If you just bob MJL Law in there, you'll find us. You can also find us on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. So
cool. Okay, and we should say this is a fixed fee service. We should say that
without a doubt. Yeah. So our point of view is we want to help businesses, and a lot of the ones who we tend to use are small and medium-sized businesses. We want to give them that fee transparency. So once they know, we will tell them a fee. That's a fixed fee. It won't change. So there's no scary bills coming in later. And our fees are extremely competitive. And, we just want to be able to help those small and medium-sized businesses.
Great. Well, look, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast for business. If you would like to feature your business in Podcast for Business, I would love to hear from you. Simply email steve@stevetwynham.com. Podcast for Business is produced and presented by Steve Twynham. Copyright applies.